So I've said this before many times and I'll say it again, but there is literally no saving Star Wars as long as it's under Disney and as long as you got Kathleen Kennedy over there at Lucasfilm. There is no chance of a rebound with this series, with this franchise, whatever have you, whether it's a movie or a TV show, as Disney is beginning to double down on their DEI agenda, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that never comes from a genuine place and is used only to hire specific individuals, that is used as a checkmark list, essentially. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. Now, like I've said many times, look, diversity and all of that is fine as long as it comes in the natural process of writing a script, as long as it comes organically, and it just so happens to fit the story, it just so happens to fit the overall plot of the show or the film, that's fine. We've had many examples like that in recent decades. But when you have a company, when you have a major studio like Walt Disney, of course, as a whole, the Walt Disney Company, and Lucasfilm, specifically with Star Wars, things really aren't looking bright at all, especially with the Acolyte series, especially with the press tour disaster after actor Charlie Barnett really made a major slip up by saying that Anakin Skywalker was the one that destroyed the Death Star. It just goes to show you that it's living proof that Leslye Headland meant everything that she said, that their number one priority, at least on the set of this actual series, was to hire those uneducated about Star Wars. Now let's get into everything here about what Leslye Headland, the showrunner and the director of The Acolyte, had to say about the ongoing backlash and about the story itself, and it's only making the press tour even worse. Let's get over it, okay? So what's interesting about this has a lot to do with Marvel Studios and the fact that Lucasfilm are considered the two most failed divisions at the Walt Disney Company. One major development now has much to do with showrunner and director Leslye Headland of The Acolyte, where she recently got very defensive over the Acolyte backlash yet again after the recent press tour disaster. Headland delivered the following: "My main priority with this series was how could we change the fans' view of the Sith and the concept of what good and bad really means. But more importantly than that, I really had this promise that I kept to myself as a director to really make The Acolyte the landmark of a show that represents the non-binary community, the LGBTQ community, which I am proudly a part of, and among others. That, of course, as my goal, and it was something that Kathleen and Dave Filoni really approved of the moment I gave them that pitch. One thing that both Kathy and Dave congratulated me on was how this story really shifts away from traditional storytelling techniques that came from George. And look, I'm sure that we are going to have fans that will remain very loud and opinionated to make themselves heard, and I think everyone else needs to realize that that type of behavior is just a childish act. If you don't like The Acolyte, then I think that just means you are one that is against diversity, equity, and inclusion and representation of all these important communities that have been ignored in the Star Wars world, and have been excluded from George's previous films that really deserve the limelight. That was my one major pet peeve with George's Star Wars films, is that it never addressed members of the LGBTQ community, really, in his films, and even the crew lacked all of that. What Kathleen Kennedy has done over the years, and what Dave Filoni stands for, has been truly inspirational to focus on these communities as the priority. There is most certainly a level of misogyny in the Star Wars community that really come from toxic fans, a large part of it coming from the male demographic that believes Star Wars belongs to them, or that it should cater to George's vision. One thing Dave and Kathy patted me on the back about was how I wanted to shift away from George's vision, and how we could find a way to evolve the franchise unlike ever before. It was what really kept me motivated as a director and as a woman running the show behind the scenes and on these wonderful sets that include a great cast coming from these communities. It was a conversation I had with Kathy many times, both on the sets and after we entered post-production, that this series was going to be the very first project in which we don't fall into the toxic side of the fandom. We really took a stand against that to make our own thing, you know, for new Star Wars fans that may just be getting into the swing of things and getting to know all these characters. Guys, before I move on about the nonsense that Leslye Headland is spewing here, let me just say one thing. This is living proof that Dave Filoni is not the savior of Star Wars. I pointed this out several times, and within the past couple of months, that he literally sides with Kathleen Kennedy. He sides with Leslye Headland. Leslye is even admitting it here. Even Kathleen Kennedy admitted it a couple of days ago. And we all saw that interview that both Leslye and Dave had with each other just a couple of days ago that also confirms everything and cements this all further. So look, Dave Filoni may have done some sprinkles of things in the Star Wars world when it comes to the TV shows, and some things are liked here and there. Look, I get it, Luke was a very fine, moment in the Book of Boba Fett, but let's face it, at the end of the day, Dave Filoni is one that fully supports Leslye Headland, the former personal assistant of Harvey Weinstein. I mean, I don't know what else to tell anyone about Dave, but that's basically what he's all about. In fact, he's always been a part of this agenda. He was just very good at keeping it a little bit more on the lower end and not as vocal about it, and is beginning to be more vocal about it in recent weeks with the lead up to the Acolyte series. But let's go further into this, alright? Now, Leslye goes on to conclude, this is the High Republic, and we can basically do whatever we want. No, you can't, because this takes place before the prequels, and it's not like it's thousands of years before the Old Republic, but whatever, let's move on. It was important to me and Kathy to request George to not come on the set of this project. We really didn't want such a large and powerful presence to alter our vision, and that motivation for the cast and the crew that come from an unbiased place, since we made sure to hire those that didn't really know anything about Star Wars, and it made the production far more enjoyable and smooth. So there you have it again. I mean, she's admitting that they deliberately hired those that knew nothing about Star Wars, just for the sake of doing so. Look, it's one thing if you hire actors and actresses that may not be all that educated about a franchise as big as this, okay, I get it, that's fine. But it's another thing to deliberately hire those that know nothing about this franchise. And look, this goes back to Charlie Barnett. Alright, he literally said Anakin destroyed the Death Star. I thought that was just laughable, and it really served as the biggest confirmation of what Leslye Headland is saying here and what she has been saying multiple times in recent weeks. So look, The Acolyte, we have a 2-episode premiere tomorrow night, by the way. It's going to be interesting to see how this thing takes off, and throughout the rest of June and the beginning of July, this thing is going to be, I believe, worse than The Last Jedi Backlash. It's why I like to call it The Last Jedi 2.0. Leslye confirmed that she looked up to Rian Johnson. She took much inspiration from him to make this story. There's also some connections in this story to The Last Jedi, to the sequel trilogy, which only makes things worse and drove fans away further. But interestingly enough, they keep doubling down on this nonsense. They feel that whatever they're doing is the right path to go, and it's no stopping them. So overall, I would love to hear, what everyone has to say about Headland, and how Dave Filoni is involved in this mess, and how Kathleen Kennedy is also the one that greenlit this project, and I would love to hear what you have to say about that. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.